Hi there, I'm Andrew, welcome to Adventure Rider. Now for most of us, we're all in search of the perfect bike, but when every year the manufacturers release their models and we don't have exactly what we want, we just resort to the keyboards and typing away in anger and in vain. But if you're Andy Scutt, you decide to build your own bike of your dreams, and that is exactly what we have here today. So Andy, thank you so much for inviting me along and letting me ride this thing in anger. So to kick things off, can you just tell us sort of what the bike is in simple terms and what you have done to it, why you wanted to build it as well?
Okay, let's start with the what, because that's much easier. It's a 2015 CRF 250L. With a Honda CB500X engine in it. So twin cylinder, makes roughly about twice the horsepower and about 3 times the torque of the original 250L single, which makes it a lot of fun. And there isn't a lot of weight difference, about 9 kilos between the engines. So you end up with a pretty pokey, quite fast CRF 250L. I guess we'll probably get into what else wraps around that, because there's quite a lot of differences. Why is that's quite a longer story. I would basically do a lot of long distance off-road riding, multiple surfaces. Before kind of tech started, used to end up doing events like Austin Vince's events in the Pyrenees, long 12-hour days. I wanted something smooth, easy to ride, but I started to think about where else I could use it. So we started looking at things like Trans-America Trail, you know, and then in the future kind of thinking, you know, travel around the world and try to understand where it would look at, you know, where you'd look at fixing those bikes if they start to go wrong. And I'd been through a lot of bikes. It's horrendous when you look at the list of bikes I've tried to modify to become adventure bikes, multiple 690s. I've been through everything trying to get there. And eventually I just got to the point where I don't like riding singles. I find the vibrations, for me, the vibrations really affect. I'd have a KTM 640 Adventure every day of the week, except for that engine. And that literally makes the bike unrideable for me. Everything else about the bike's amazing. I wanted a twin, and no one makes a twin. No one makes a twin that's at the time, probably sub 220 kilos.
Well, it's the engine you want, it's just no one puts it in a bike that makes sense.
Having been through a number of rally raid builds on 690s and elements, I looked at a forum post on ADV Rider from a guy called Levi in the States. He's in Oregon. And he built a 250L. He was in the middle of building it at the time, and I was just like, sorry, a 500L. That's exactly what I'm looking for. Everything's Honda, everything's straight out the Honda parts catalogue, with the exception of some minor accessories around it. Fundamentally, the bike is a Honda bike, which means I can take it to any Honda dealership. The engine's Honda, the ECU's Honda, they can plug straight into it. You know, all the components and everything around it, generally speaking, are Honda. It's a steel frame, it's modifiable. If I damage it, I can unbolt the subframe. I can get it welded by any idiot with a stick welder anywhere in the world. It kind of ticked all of those boxes that nothing else I could find did, and I had tried everything else.
But it wasn't just the practicality of being out in an adventure,
no.
It was also the rideable weight. The weight was a big factor, right?
So weight was a massive thing. Anybody who rides long distance or rides off-road consistency knows how critical that weight is. Trying to keep under, my goal was to keep under 160 kilos. That was the goal. Finished bike, fully fueled, everything in it, 160 kilos. This came in at the time, there are a few more modifications I've added since then, 156 kilos fully fueled. Wow. And that'll do about 180 to 200 miles on a tank. It's only 12.5 litres of fuel. But having that weight so low, with so much enjoyable power, and it will sit at 80 miles an hour on the road all day long, I have done it. It's just ticked all of those boxes, and I could find nothing at the time that was anywhere near that. I've done a lot of changes since I built it. So I started in 2016, took me about 6 or 7 months to finish the first iteration. There's been a lot of changes since then, but the fundamental part of it is, and I've done 20-something now, 24,000 miles on it. Fundamentally, it is that twin cylinder, butter smooth, really linear power, climbs like a mountain goat, really hard to stall out. Easy to ride bike. Well, you've ridden it today, and I gave you a choice between the Cove and this when we stopped for coffee, and you took this again.
Yes, I did. I mean, To the point you made about there was nothing at the time that did what this does, is there anything now? Because I still don't think that there is.
I don't know why there's this gap in the market. There are no twin cylinder bikes I think you can find. That Cove is probably the lightest thing you can buy twin cylinder. Even the 500s are all over 200 kilos.
Well, we were talking about CF Moto, which obviously is trying to do what you did, but it is so much heavier, and the Cove in that way is more similar than.
So if you look at a CBX500X, even a rally rated one, which I rode before I even started this, I went up to see John, I rode his bike. It's 35 kilos more than this, with all the light rally raid stuff on it.
Wow.
So there's nothing within 30 or 40 kilos of this. That's a lot. If you think of your luggage when you're traveling, most people travel with maybe 15 or 20 kilos of luggage maximum. Double that and think about carrying, you're almost carrying a pillion passengers worth of weight on a bike that you haven't put anything else on at the moment. So
yeah, I mean, you said that out of the current fleet on the market today, the closest thing is probably the Cove 450 Rally, coincidentally, obviously the same brand. And yeah, I've ridden that, and that is, it is a similar experience in the sense that it makes you feel like a riding god, just like this does. It's so capable and lightweight, but it has nothing like the refinement of this in road mannerisms and the engine. The twin, it makes such a difference. And you imagine it in theory, it's one thing. On paper, if we could put this in that, it should be really good. But the reality is even better than anything I've ridden. It's astonishing. It's just so good. And as you said, I had the choice between getting on this or back on the 800X, and this is the bike of my dreams, and I think it would be for a lot of people as well, what you've created here. So it sort of astonishes me that that's not the goal for manufacturers, and we could talk for hours about this.
Well, I've sat with Honda UK. We were at an event when I first built it. I took the bike onto their stand and I showed them and I went, look, it's just Honda. Like, you guys could make this out of your parts bin, but no, I don't understand. Even that was 8 years ago, I think I showed it to Honda. About 8 years, nothing's changed. There is you go middleweight and you're 200 and something kilos. You know, even the 500s that are coming now still don't fit in that. And there's that gap between, and it gets really blurry between enduro bikes. What are coming now is kind of the CRF 300, Vogue, Himalaya, all those singles that are in that kind of area.
In case they have the new 390 rallies and stuff.
Yeah, and the 390 enduro from KT, they all sit in that gap. But you look at the weight of them and the power. This has more power. It weighs less. It's got better suspension on it. And I don't think, I've seen the pricing for the 390 enduro. I don't think I spent more on this than they're selling that for. They could make these, but they don't want to.
Is it emissions? Is it regulation? Is that the problem?
It's a really, really good question. I could have put the catalyzer back on this of a CB500, no problem at all. I probably might have had to use the CRF 250L one. I could have made it as standard as possible. I tried to keep it as standard as possible, as kind of factory looking as I could have done. It's got CRF 250L plastics on it, a 250 seat. It's got, the front end's of a CRF 450X, but that's a different matter.
Well, yeah, let's bring it back to the bike, because we could spend all day talking about why they're not making exactly what you've done, which is a brilliant question. But so, yes, we've obviously talked about the engine in the frame. So why that frame and not one of the sort of 450 motocross bikes or something that's...
Fundamentally, it's a steel frame, which means it's easy to weld, it's easy to cut, it's easy to fix later if it bends or damages. It's a 250L frame that you can buy in from Thailand, I think, for about £400 if you want a whole new frame. It's really straightforward to do. It's easy to work with. As soon as you get into aluminium, it starts getting really, really hard to do the shaping you have to do. So you have to do some modifications to the frame. The engine doesn't fit. It's not bolt straight in. You have to change the engine mounts. You have to change the ending cradle. So it's really probably hard. You might see some photos later. There's cuts made to the frame here and down here, and this is removable. The two rails that go underneath the engine are both removable. So you can drop the engine out. It takes me about 30, 35 minutes. I can take the whole engine out of the bike.
Wow.
Which is a bonus, but it was only like that because I had to get the engine into the bike. So we did that. So the frame makes a lot of sense. It's a steel frame, so it's not the lightest. Obviously, it's a CRF 250L underneath, but it means I can unbolt the subframe and replace it. I've already smashed up one subframe. I looped the bike less than a year ago.
It's easy to do on this. It's a lot of fun to play about on.
It's got a lot of power to it. So yeah, I twisted up the rear subframe. So it's fine. 4 bolts. The thing just slid straight off the back. I didn't really disconnect some electronics, and you can swap out the whole rear subframe. Bolted a new one on that I bought for £20 off eBay. It's a 250L. There are parts everywhere for them. You could rock up into any Honda dealership and probably get the air filter for it, standard 250L. The plastics, the anything around the engine, CB500. It's easy to do. So that's kind of what we were trying to do.
But you didn't sort of stop there with just getting the frame and the engine married up. You've got all this suspension.
So yeah, so it's got a YSS 300 rally shock on it. That gives a lot more, about 1.5 inches more ground clearance than the 250L. It's got a CRF 450X front end on it, so KYB forks, 450. The SM Pro wheels front and back are both 450X. Takes a little bit of modification on the back. Cush drive on the rear, because you lose. The CB500 has a cush drive in it. The CRF 250 has a slipper clutch in it. Because I changed out I don't have the back wheel from the CB500 and I don't have the engine from the 250, so I lost both elements of any form of cush around the motor. So yeah, put a cush drive on the rear, which just gives you a little bit less hit on the chain as you're playing around, and it's very easy to play with. Highway dirt bikes is all of the front fairing, although I've modified it heavily since I bought that. The hand guards, they're wonderful mirrors.
I like the Baja designs.
Yeah, Baja designs gloves. So all of the white frame that's around there, and I've got my drinking system on here because I hate carrying a backpack.
Yeah, this is so clever. It's great.
It's just magnet
so
held.
Simple. I'm surprised I haven't seen it. It's like a cycle mount, right?
Yeah, it's just a bicycle with a thermal pot in it. This is off a Z1000, Kawasaki Z1000, this screen. AliExpress for about £8, I think.
Why not?
But it just gives that really nice, I really like the look of it. And then it's just CB500 dash. The ignition is really simple. There's a keyless ignition sensor down here. So you can just turn it on and off with a switch, or you can use the keyless fob when you're traveling, which I do all the time. The exhaust is custom made. That was a little bit tricky because the CB500 is quite sensitive around the intake and output side of the engine. So on the intake, we've done a lot of work on I don't know why I said we. I've done a lot of work on the throttle body into the airbox to separate out so basically what it does, it scavenges air from each side. Because it's a twin, if you dump it straight into the airbox, it will just rob air from each side as the cylinders intake air. So you have to put a divider in, you have to extend that out to put some sort of smoothing around that incoming air. As soon as you do that, that makes the engine run a lot better and a bit more efficient. And then the exhaust is quite sensitive as well about diameter of the exhaust, the length of the collector, the diameter after the collector. So I had to get an exhaust made for it. And I found an amazing welder, and he did a fabulous job, because it's hard to see, but there's not a lot of space to play with down there underneath the engine. The sump's cut back as well, so service intervals, I kind of halved what a CB500 engine does, but you're still at 6,000, 7,000 miles for an oil change.
And actually back to that, the Cove 450, that has far, far shorter service intervals by a factor of about 5. So that's a huge difference.
Yeah, so I think 16,000 miles, I think, and the book, I think, for the CB500 for a valve clearance check. I've not changed a single valve clearance in the whole time I've had it. They've all measured exactly the same the whole time I've had the bike.
And you said, what, 20 how many thousand miles?
I think it's 28,000 for a valve check, 16,000 I think some weird thing for an oil change, but I do it. And I've done 24,000 miles on it. Wow. So, and it hasn't changed at all. Every time I do something around the engine, I do take the top off and have a quick look at the valves. Never moved.
I mean, on our sister channel on the urban side, people are always customizing bikes, but they generally go to the bike shed show and they sit there. They don't often get tested that hard. Even if they get ridden, they're on tarmac. Yep. This thing has been put through everything, and it's done that many miles, and it works beautifully. And that's what's really astonishing about it, is you've managed to do it, and actually it works to the same standard, almost as if it was like a factory bike. It's astonishing.
And that's the reason why I kind of went with Honda, is that I wanted something that was rock solid reliable, and of those 24,000 miles, probably at least half, maybe 60% is off-road. So I do, like when I do big events, 12-hour days, you're doing 200-300 miles a day off-road, back-to-back days. The bike has got to be reliable, bulletproof, because there's not a lot of time in between.
But also comfortable, and it feels, obviously the weight and dimensions, it feels like a single, but it has beautiful comfort to it. You said the seat is also an aftermarket one, that
seat
it's
concept,
not custom.
My favourite. No, it's just a CRF 250L with a seat concepts high.
But it makes it so rideable. And the exhaust, back to just that briefly, it makes the most beautiful crackle and pop on the roll-off. Like it was just perfectly tuned to do that. But it's not loud, it's not offensive. No. it's just perfect.
It is, and you know, keeping it relatively quiet is, I'm a big fan of that. I'm not a big fan of lots of noise. Like Cove 800 is quite loud, but this is, I'd happily ride this anywhere. It doesn't feel like it's offensive, but you're right, it does, if you ride it hard or you ride it fun, it does pop a little bit, but it's not too bad.
Yeah, it's remarkable, as they say, a custom build that worked in practice and works after so many miles. And I am not just saying this because Andy has stood next to me, but this is the best bike I have ever ridden, and I want it. It's just, it is everything that we are asking for as a customer base in the sort of lightweight adventure market. So congratulations for absolutely nailing it. I don't know where this leaves you. Where do you go? You've got an 800X that's been fully sorted, and then you've got this for being silly and naughty on. You don't need anything else ever.
I'd say, I mean, I built this, what, 2016, 9 years ago now. I can't think of anything I would replace it with. I've changed in my garage has been this bike and something bigger. The bigger bike I think has changed 7 times since I've had this. There's nothing I would swap this for. Like, I have friends that ride, you know, when we're just green laning, friends of mine that will ride KTM 350s and 250s, light bikes that are significantly lighter than this. I don't feel like I can't keep up with them. I feel like I can ride this continuously all day, and I come off it feeling a lot better than they do, because their singles, you know, they're buzzy and vibey, and if I rode them, I think I'd find it really hard on my hands by the end of the day. I just have this, I think it's a little bit of a sensitivity to it. This is butter smooth. I mean, you've ridden it, the torque curve on it is incredibly flat. It's like riding a moped, I think. I always think of it as something like that. It's never going to catch you out, which means when you put it at a hill, or you know, you want to climb and you want to keep the traction going, it's incredibly good for that, because that really, really smooth engine, you can just keep it pegged, and you know it's not going to pulse, it's not going to give you massive lumps of torque, it's just going to tractor up.
Well, yeah, I mean, in terms of final thoughts, I don't know where this leaves me, other than to sort of recognise that my riding experience may well have peaked today and it's all downhill from here. But, you know, like a unicorn, I mean, I hate using that term, it gets talked about too much. This should be taken by scientists and broken down and studied and recreated for the benefit of mankind. Andy, thank you so much.
No worries.
And I look forward to seeing what else you do in the future, if it's anything like this. Thank you so much for watching. If you have any questions about Andy's build, I'm sure he'd be happy to chime in the comments section below. Although this can go on for a long time in terms of all the rest of the modifications, so we kept it concise. But thank you so much for letting me ride it today. It's been an absolute blast, and stay tuned to the channel for more stuff. The world's finest adventure gear in and out of the studio on some adventures too. Thank you for watching. We'll see you soon. Goodbye.